Hello, my name is Merritt Shear. I am in Art History 114A, and this is part one, my visual analysis of my project. So let's get right into it. So the painting I have chosen, or artwork I've chosen for my project, is one of Perseus and Andromeda in landscape. It's by an unknown artist. It's a Roman fresco from the Augustan period, and it's found in an imperial villa in Italy. And it's from the last decade of the 1st century BCE. It's 62 and 3/4 inches tall and 46 and 3/4 inches wide. So here I have broken down into different pieces what the painting sort of looks like and some main aspects of it, but we're going to be focusing mainly on the bigger picture, no pun intended. So as you can see here, we have a rectangular form, and it's sort of outlined by almost a house-like shape. There are two slants at the top, and it's framed in darker color. The first thing I'd like to talk about here is the composition of this artwork. It has sort of a natural rock form in the middle in which we can see a female figure chained to the rock itself, and that rock sort of cascades down. You can see another female figure sitting down there. There's the natural form of the dragon, which is sort of adding balance to each side, two figures. We can see these two figures right here, this man and then the one right here, and two, I suppose, are adding balance along with these two, sort of, maybe I'll see them better here, these two sort of miscellaneous objects on either side of the rock next to the female figure. So her being there as a central figure, we can tell that she's important to whatever story this image is depicting, which is that of Perseus and Andromeda, which we'll get into in part two. But we can see her arms are making strong lines of force and sort of pointing to each of the figures next to her, which your eyes sort of get drawn to despite her being the middle figure. In the background, we can see other structures too. To the left, there are what can presumably be rocks and trees. It's sort of hard to see. They're very faded into the back. And to the right, we have some buildings, perhaps forum, maybe a household. But I'd just like to talk about use of color in this. There is mainly the secondary colors used in this. As you can see, there are lots of blues and greens in the background. And then the rocks and sort of details and the people are painted as purple, and then a lot of the flesh tones are more orangey, and aspects of the dragon and rocks, light aspects. I think that the use of color here is very interesting because it depicts a sort of moodier thing, and we know that this is taking place in a sea, and it's a more dramatic story, which again we will get into. But you can tell that there's some sort of moodier, dramatic situation going on, and I mean that's also emphasized by the sea monster waiting down below. But yeah, we can tell that there's an intricate amount of story going on. You can see that these two figures might look like almost the same figure, just going about in time, which we actually discussed in class the other day. But yeah, I think it's a beautiful piece, and I was really intrigued by the overall tone and color and sort of flowiness and softness of it all, while it's still depicting a very clear scene of something going on, which we will talk about more in part two. So let's head over to part two. So for part two, the cultural analysis of this presentation, let's get into it. So from the painting, who were Perseus and Andromeda? So Perseus and Andromeda were figures in Greco-Roman mythology. Perseus was a Greek hero, a son of Zeus and the princess Danae, and Andromeda was an Ethiopian princess, a daughter of King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia. So as the story goes, Andromeda's mother was bragging about how her daughter Andromeda was the most beautiful of all the Nereids, or more beautiful than all of the Nereids, and Poseidon took great offense to this, as they're sea spirits, and chained Andromeda to a rock and was going to set a sea monster after her, which we can see depicted in the art here. So, there's the classic reoccurring event in Greco-Roman mythology where a young woman is punished for an action that is, or for something that is not from her own direct faults. It happens quite frequently, so we see that here. And Perseus, he sees her chained to the rock and goes to rescue her, which we can also see as a part of this. This figure right here is Perseus. He's seen in two different places. He's flying, he's rescued, and then he's here. This is a depiction of him asking Andromeda's father for her hand in marriage, and unsure who that figure at the bottom is, probably a Nereid, and of course the sea monster. So let's talk a little bit about how this is relevant. How do portraits help us see how people in one particular culture see another? So in Heliodorus's Ethiopia, which is a play that he wrote, he depicts Andromeda as a white Ethiopian child as the result of adultery. This play was written in 1547, likely because of, like, he wrote out a storyline of how she happened to be a white Ethiopian child from a black mother, likely because of the late Roman wall paintings, specifically mentioned in the Black Andromeda Journal article by Elizabeth McGrath, because of the paintings where she is depicted as white, such as the one I am analyzing here. It's commonly known throughout literature that Andromeda was an Ethiopian princess, meaning that she would have almost certainly been a black woman. Ovid, in his Heroides, describes her as having dark skin, and he also refers to her in Metamorphoses as having skin akin to marble, which a lot of people took as an argument for her being white, when in reality he likely meant her in black marble, which was a common marble tone used in ancient Greece. Sappho, the poet, refers to her as black multiple times, and there are a lot of accounts of this. So how do we interpret this? A lot of Africans in Greek texts most of them were all referred to as Ethiopians when they meant just anywhere in Africa for the most part. And it's widely debated whether or not they viewed them with prejudice. And I think this is a really interesting point to bring up, and it's shown a lot in this artwork because we can see the white Andromeda, and just a little bit later in time. Culturally, it's unknown whether or not the Greeks viewed black people as with prejudice, different from themselves. It's unclear, but art like this displays some sort of prejudice to an extent I believe could be widely agreed on. It's just an interesting choice when there are so many accounts of her being described as having dark skin to paint her as white reoccurringly in art. Some of the most famous depictions of this myth include her as a white woman. So I think that just says a lot about how, as cultures progress, started viewing people that look differently from themselves. And I think this artwork is a really good depiction of such things. I think it's also good to mention some of the other articles that I read for this include frescoes of the Villa of P. Fannia Sinister, which is from the Heilbronn Timeline of History, and a lot of those frescoes depict images where it's from a very, very similar time period that this piece is, and those are just very similar pieces, so I wanted to mention them. I don't think they have too much to do with the cultural aspect that I'm focusing on here, but they did aid in my understanding of wall frescoes, along with Roman wall painting styles from Smart History. This could be possibly akin to the second style of Pompeian wall paintings, with the depth of the architecture and such. But again, not my focus for right now. I was really excited to talk about this and pick this piece. I did not immediately understand it was Andromeda and Perseus, though that is a myth that I do know fairly well. And I was really excited to find out that it was, because I think this is a very interesting topic, and I was very happy to talk about it and read about it. I just think the different depictions of it, even debated now, we don't know how people viewed everything. It's all a very interesting interesting way to do things. So thank you so much for listening to my project. I'm going to go to the credits. All right. Thank you so much. And here are my sources. Thank you so much for listening to my video. And I had a lot of fun working on this project. So yeah, thank you so much.